Guys, welcome into the Gashouse gang. Matt Pauley, Kevin Wheeler with you here on a Wednesday. Normally, I'm not here on Wednesday, but Tom has some things to deal with today. And when we could start off with this, Matt, we can do this very briefly. Just pass along our condolences to the Greenblat family. Bill Greenblat passed away here in the last week. That's where Tom's going to be now. He's at the funeral. And for those that knew Bill, great guy. Photographer at Cardinals games for those that are viewing that don't know. But been there for a long time. Was a firefighter before that. Just a really great guy. Everybody knows him. There's been an outpouring of sympathy on Twitter. So that's just kind of why we have a little bit of a different lineup today. Glad Tom was able to do that and represent KMOX as we remember Bill.
Yeah, he's been around a long time, not just doing sports. He's been very involved with political photography. Yep. I feel bad. I didn't know this until reading one of the stories about his passing. He and I went to the same high school. We're both Ladue guys. So, I did not realize that about him, but really, really sad news that he passed away.
So condolences to the family and obviously to all of his friends as well. And again, thanks to Tom for representing KMOX there, and obviously that's why I'm pinch hitting for Tom today. So we got a lot to do, Matt. We've got a bunch of different topics. Yesterday you and I on Sports Open Line talked about the report that was released yesterday. Jeff Passan had a great write-up, and there were other write-ups of it as well. That Major League Baseball's been studying pitching injuries, and they've been studying pitcher usage and what's leading to injuries. And we don't have the time. And by the way, if anybody wants to go back and podcast all of that, go to KMLX.com, Sports Open Line. You can podcast, you listen to our conversation about how youth sports impact this, what Major League Baseball needs to do to get it to trickle down to the younger ages and all of that. We don't have time to repeat all of that today. But I did want to get into something that, and if you want to jump in on the comments and ask questions or offer your 2 cents, feel free to do it while you're watching the Gashouse gang.
Can I put just one real quick thing for people watching, because I think, Kevin, people who don't know your background, you played at a pretty high level. You were a Division I college baseball player. You obviously continue to covered on an everyday basis Major League Baseball, and you continue to work with young amateur players. So if people read that yesterday and it was a summary of a 65-page report that was issued by Major League Baseball, I'm sure there are some questions there that people don't completely understand. It's quite the resource for folks out there to have somebody like you, Kevin. So like you said, put it in the comments and we'll try to get to it, because I think you are uniquely qualified to comment on just about everything that was mentioned in there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the one part I don't have is the background as a pitcher. But I mean, as somebody that caught pitchers and then obviously has covered Major League Baseball and talked to everybody you can talk to, retired players, current players, coaches, things like that. And also having coached 14-year-olds for the last 11 years, I understand the challenge. Like, I think I understand all of the worlds that go into this, right?
Yeah.
And there's a difficult balance between, especially at the younger ages, between competing, which should be secondary. Development should be first, and competing should be secondary. And I know that the structure of youth sports, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, isn't always conducive to that. It makes it more difficult. So I understand the challenges. That's why we got into it last night, and it's an important thing to do. Now, one of the things,
20 minutes on it, and I feel like we barely touched the surface.
I could do 2 hours on it.
Yeah.
Easy 2 hours on it. It's just because there's so many levels to it. There's so many things to understand there, and the short version that I would say is kind of like the simple message is, I think Major League Baseball needs to take more control of the message. They need to take more control for teaching coaches and cut some checks to make it pay for it. Like, it's their product long term that's being impacted by all of this.
Yeah.
This should be looked at like research and development, product development. If you're going to just leave it to other people to provide your resources, it's insane. You got to take a more active role as an $11 billion a year business and growing. There's no reason why Major League Baseball should be leaving these decisions and this information, leaving it to just any number of people who, by the way, some are geniuses. Like the people at Driveline are brilliant. They know what they're doing. They put science behind it. They care. They work hard. They change when they find out new information. Like, there are brilliant people out there. And then there are people who just don't know anything. Or they don't know anything from the last 20 years or whatever. And Major League Baseball needs to do a better part of that. Now, one of the things in the piece from Jeff Passan, he outlined like 5 areas of this, and we're not going to get into all of them, but there's one that I want to get into, and we touched on it briefly yesterday, and it's an area where, and this is how we teased it today on Twitter, like there's an area where at least for a year and maybe a little more, the Cardinals are actually ahead of the curve on a trend. And that is with starting pitcher usage in the minor leagues. And I've seen a number of people comment on this. Kyle Boddy came up as a driveline guy. He was the pitching coordinator for the Cincinnati Reds for a period of time. He is considered one of the smartest people out there when it comes to instructing pitchers and teaching that. And he had an interesting tweet about this last night when he was talking about it. And he said that, the same thing I've been saying, which makes me feel good, the same thing I've been saying for like a 10, 12 years, is that professional major league teams are not training starting pitchers to do what is required of them when they get to the major leagues. In the minor leagues, they're babied. They pitch once a week. They have 75 pitch limits, and they're throwing 100, 110 innings a year. You get to the big leagues, and it's like, okay, buddy, now you got to go give us 6 innings every 5th day, 32 times a year. And they're just not trained for it. It's like training to run a 5K and then saying, go run a marathon.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that the sport is finally starting to recognize it. But even more importantly, I'm happy to see that the Cardinals were a little bit ahead of the curve with what they did last year.
Yeah, so we've been critical about the Cardinals and their player development, obviously, and that's why they're making all these changes. But you give credit where credit is due. In one area that, like you said, they're really ahead of the curve, and they led all major league organizations last year in innings pitched, innings per start for starting pitchers across the minor leagues. They have made it a concerted effort. Now, there's a brand new group of people coming in that are going to run player development in the minor leagues with the Cardinals. So hopefully this next group coming in is like-minded when it comes to that. And this continues to be a trend with the Cardinals where they do allow pitchers to go deeper into games. But you're right. I mean, these pitchers in the minor leagues, and it's different when we're talking about guys at single A and guys who get to triple A. Like the development process and being careful with guys, that makes a lot of sense when you're pitching for Peoria and when you're down at Palm Beach.
Does it? Because if it made sense, it would be preventing injuries, but it's not. Injuries continue to rise. We've been doing pitch counts and limiting workloads and all that for 10, 15 years. And injuries keep going up. So, I mean, is it working?
Yeah. I think when I talk about those low A teams, I'm talking mostly about like 18-year-olds who are coming out of high school.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about Quinn Matthews when he showed up out of Stanford at Palm Beach this past year. I'm not talking about the 22-year-olds. I'm talking about the 18-year-olds. Okay. I think it is right when you have the 18, the 19-year-olds who you're bringing out of high school. I think it is right to start their professional career and be gentle with them, but you amp up quickly. That's what I would say.
I find this interesting because, in high school, it is really common for top pitchers to be throwing 100, 110, 115 pitches a start. And those are 7-inning starts. And then you get to the professional ranks where you have better training, you have better medical facilities, better pitching coaches, better everything. And all of a sudden now you're back down to 80. 85, 90. And again, my point is not that you shouldn't do things to be careful. My point is it's not working. It's not changing anything because the driving force behind arm injuries is effort.
100%.
And the harder you try to throw, the more likely something's going to break. And the problem with that, the reason it's such a catch-22 is that throwing harder and using more effort on your breaking pitches and stuff works. You're a better pitcher when you do it. So you've got this kind of balance, right? It's a tough thing.
Yeah, baseball's at this really weird spot right now where everybody's going max effort, and that's resulting in you're getting less innings out of your starting pitchers and injuries are going up. So at some point in time, you said this yesterday, Kevin, and it's right on. You still want to do those things. You still want to have in your back pocket the ability to throw 98, the ability to have incredible break on your pitches. You want to be able to do these things, but you don't want to do them every single time. So we can sit here and argue whether or not an 18-year-old at low A should be throwing 100 pitches or not. That's not really the point of this conversation. The point of the conversation is the style of pitching as you move up through the minor leagues and then eventually get to the big leagues it needs to change a little bit if guys do want to stay healthy. And one of the things that was brought up in that story yesterday was, there's this overwhelming feeling from pitchers that they can do this because if they blow out their elbow and they need Tommy John surgery, well, you know what? They're going to be on the big league injured list, and they're going to get service time, and they're going to get major league payment, and they're going to come back better than ever, because we always talk about that, how Tommy John could, maybe even add a mile or two to your max velocity. Where in reality, and that is true for some guys, I'm not running away from that.
It's only true because you're taking something that was breaking and fixing it.
Right.
You're not actually pushing your own ceiling up. You're just getting back to 100%. That's all it is.
About 20% of guys who have Tommy John, they don't come back from it. It's not, they're never, either they don't pitch again or they're never the same. So that we don't talk about that enough. That's a gamble. If I sit and tell you that there's a room of 10 pitchers who are going to get Tommy John surgery, and 2 of them, basically their major league careers are going to be over. If you're standing in that room, that's probably a nerve-wracking room to be in, because 20% at the surface level doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking at a room of 10 people and 2 of them are walking out the door, it feels like a lot more people.
It's the Gashouse gang. Matt Pauley, Kevin Wheeler with you here on a Wednesday. All right, a little bit more on this. I want to spend some time on the Blues and on some college football today too, but a little bit more on this pitching side of things, because what's interesting to me is the dynamic in the sport, right? The intent is good, by the way. Teams are trying, by limiting workloads and things, they're trying to avoid injuries, or they're trying to make it so that maybe you have 1 Tommy John instead of 2 in your career, right? Like the goal is good, but you're contradicting that stated goal of keeping people healthy by emphasizing velocity and spin rate, which again, you kind of have to because it works. But look at the best pitchers. What I never understand in baseball is why the goals aren't to imitate the best. You can't all be the best, right? We know that. You can't all be the best. But the best hitters do certain things. But we don't try to be Mike Trout. Everybody just wants to lift and separate and pull the ball in the air. Well, that's not what Mike Trout does. Now, you can't all be as good as Mike Trout, but the ideas still play, right? I mean, some of the ideas that we're talking about are the same ideas that Ted Williams talked about 80, 90 years ago. And on the pitching side, look at guys like Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer and Garrett Cole. These are guys that all throw hard, man. But what did Justin Verlander learn pretty early in his career? That trying to throw 100 all the time doesn't do anything but wear you out, and it saps your command, and it takes away that special weapon when you need it in a special moment. And as he got older, because I watched Justin Verlander's first no-hitter. His last pitch of the game was like 100 miles an hour, and it was pitch 115. He was throwing flat-out gas the entire game. And he's always been a great pitcher, and he's a Hall of Fame player. But what did he learn as he went? He learned that he could pitch at 94, 95, not at 98, 99 all the time, and get people out by using all of his pitches, by throwing more strikes. And then when you need it, that 100's there, that 98's there. And I think it's interesting that we look at the short term, like the small sample size of what works, right? Because we know in an at-bat, in an inning, velocity works. Right. In a big spot, velocity and spin work. But do they work for a 200-inning workload for 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years? And what are the guys who are the best doing? And maybe we teach a little more of that and emphasize that as part of development, as opposed to here, just go rip it.
Yeah, and again, I think we need to make very clear, you're not saying run away from velocity.
No, you teach it. You teach it, you train for it. Just like I would never tell a hitter to stop lifting weights and getting big and strong. Right. You're doing that because there's a benefit to it. But the hitter shouldn't be trying to hit a home run every at-bat. You shouldn't be trying to every swing your A swing, because sometimes you need your B swing. Sometimes you just need a fly ball to score a run. So situational baseball is understood by everybody, but unfortunately we've gone away from prioritizing it.
The reason I say that, Kevin, is because there is a group of fans, or probably a vocal minority, that anytime we talk about velocity, they want to talk about the guy who maxes out at 89 and he's a soft toss guy and he's going to get a bunch of ground balls. So I want to be really clear. That's not what we're talking about here.
No.
It's as much as you might appreciate those guys, the ones that still kind of make it work. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about survival. So somebody who can go touch 99 consistently, should they touch 99 consistently, or should they learn to do some other things to keep them healthy and keep them going? And we put so much, look at closers. Like, closers pitch in very short stints. So if you're a Ryan Helsley, you can go do nothing but throw your 99-mile-per-hour fastball over and over and over again if you need to. He doesn't always do that, but you can do that if need be. That's because you're pitching one inning and they're being very careful with how often you're going to pitch. If you're a starter and you're trying to get to 200 plus innings, you have to survive. There has to be days where you're going 6 and 7 innings. We just don't see that as much anymore. So to your point, figuring out a way to have secondary stuff to even take some. We laughed the one time when Jack Flaherty got on, I think it was Jim Hayes, about changing speeds on the fastball, because what he was saying, I was not on Jack's side when he said
Jack
that.
was wrong. Jack was being an ass.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. He was being an ass.
What he actually,
his velo was down and he was trying to make an excuse for it.
Right. But what he actually said was correct, that you should change your speed of a fastball. Like, that is something that you should be able to do. You can mix pitches, and that gives you more pitches, essentially. If you can take a mile or two off your fastball and show that occasionally and then come back up, that's going to make it that much tougher for hitters to face you.
Right. And when we're looking at this in the big picture for the sport, I don't think this is something you can legislate. And I was really happy to see Rob Manfred mention recently that he doesn't like the idea of trying to put in like a minimum number of innings or pitches for a starting pitcher. You can't do that. It's stupid. Because if a guy's getting his brains beaten and he needs to come out, right? If his arm is sore, he needs to come out. Like, you can't do it that way. But what you can do is incentivize the behavior that you want, right? You can, and how do we incentivize behavior? Well, for a minor league player, it's about getting promotions and advancing, right? So advance the guys that can go deep into games. In the major leagues, pay the guys that can give you 180 to 200 innings. Pay the guys that can give you 6 innings a start instead of the guy that's going to be 5 and dive. Because one thing that's really true to me is that baseball is an entertainment business. You're trying to sell tickets. So what are the things that can be draws to people buying tickets? Well, certainly one of them is if your team is great, right? Winning is always going to sell tickets. Having an exciting everyday player, Albert in his prime, guys like that, guys like Ohtani now. That's it. Pitching matchups also sell tickets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. When Paul Skeens was pitching against the Cardinals, it was a draw. And if we're going to lose that, you're losing a draw that could get an average person to watch a game they might not watch otherwise, or to go buy a ticket to go see a player, because that's the beauty of a starting pitcher. In advance he's pitching that day. You don't know that Albert's going to get a day off or not. You don't know if Mike Trout's going to get a day off or not when you buy the ticket, but you can look at that schedule and you can see, well, Shohei Ohtani's pitching tonight. Paul Skeens is pitching tonight. I'm going to go buy those tickets because I want to see that player.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Paul Skeens. I read something recently, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but there was something written comparing the home attendance in Pittsburgh on Skeens days versus non-Skeens days. So you can see how many more people are walking into the ballpark just based off the starting pitcher that day. And it was thousands. Paul Skeens was single-handedly responsible for thousands upon thousands of more people walking into games in Pittsburgh. And that's also part of the reason that pitching is expensive at the high end. Now, it's not part of the reason that pitching is expensive in the middle end. Nobody's going to show up to watch Frankie Montas pitch. But it is part of the reason that when we're talking about super high-end starters, man, they cost a lot of money.
They do. And by the way, the super high-end guys are the ones that do what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to be a $35 million a year pitcher, $40 million a year pitcher, you probably need to be the 200 inning guy.
Blake Snell might have a comment.
He's basically the one exception
of
the guys that have really gotten paid. And Blake Snell, I mean, and this is the thing that we're talking when you're going through this, because teams are always talking about they don't have enough depth. We're burning through pitchers. Well, part of this is why, right? I mean, like, the way you use people has something to do with why you're using 17 starters instead of 9 starters for a season. And I know I'm exaggerating on the 17
Not
side, but
always.
no,
Not always.
in some cases it's 17. But like it's, teams used to be able to be like, all right, we got our 5-man rotation. We've got a long reliever who can spot start. We've got 2 guys at AAA we think can be fill-in guys. And then maybe you have another prospect who's developing who might show up later in the year. And you'd feel like you have depth. Mm-hmm. That ain't depth anymore.
No.
Now your depth needs to be 10 or 12 instead of 7 or 8.
It is. It's rare to even come out of spring training with your initial 5. And that was another part of this study as well, that there are a ton of injuries that are happening between the start of spring training and an opening day. And is that connected to the way guys are going about their off seasons or something else? That we can talk about that till we're blue in the face. But yeah, you need a lot of starters to compete in Major League Baseball. We see way too many bullpen games. I also think that's something that Rob Manfred probably doesn't like. He does not like and it happened in the postseason, Kevin. The best teams in all of baseball are running out bullpen games.
The Dodgers, with a $350 million payroll, are running bullpen games in both the World Series and the NLCS. That's insane.
Crazy. Just
and
so
I get it.
I
get it. They had a lot of injuries, but it is these are all tied together. And I think there's a happy medium that baseball needs to find, which is we need to teach high-end velocity. But like when you think about it, a lot of these injuries exist before a player ever is drafted. They happen, when from the wear and tear from the time you're a teenager all the way through college. And part of it is because the standard set by Major League Baseball teams is if you don't throw 95 or more, you're probably not getting drafted if you're a right-hander.
Which is a problem that goes into the problem.
I mean, like that's kind of the thing is you set that standard. Well, people are going to meet the standard.
Yeah. How do you get drafted? How do you become a pro? How do you get a college scholarship?
Got to throw hard.
Throwing hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it is. And the other side of it is, and I it might have been Kyle Boddy, but if it wasn't him, it was somebody in that training realm who made a good point. And if you don't do it, what are you even worried about? You're not going to pitch anyway. Yeah. If you're throwing 88, nobody's bringing you along. You're not pitching in the big leagues. You're not going to have a career. You might pitch D2. You might pitch low end D1 if you're really good, right? You have a great breaking ball. You have great command and all that. So again, there's a balance though, and hopefully Major League Baseball teams will realize this because I think it's a hard thing to legislate. It's just something that teams need to be smart about. Understand you need innings. Everybody knows it. Generations of pitchers have done this. Why? It's like the only thing in sports that's going backwards is pitcher workloads. Everything else is bigger, faster, stronger. But guys used to be able to throw 300, 350 innings every year. And now if you get a $180, you're considered an innings eater.
Yeah. It even mentioned a story about the actual training, about short burst training versus more, long-term cardiovascular type training, how you want the short burst stuff in there, but that maybe what's connected to injuries here is the fact that bodies are not conditioned to expend energy for a long amount of time.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. I mean, it's the standards being set. It's the way that pitchers are used in Major League Baseball. It's look, I see it, and I'm not going to go into the depth here, but you can see this in high school. You can see it, and even 12, 13, 14U baseball, where a guy will go out there and he'll pitch, he'll throw 6 innings and 80 pitches, and they got a doubleheader. The next game he's playing shortstop. You can't do that.
No, you're gonna.
We have
arms gonna fall off.
We have a travel, and I'm a big fan of travel baseball because I think there's a lot of good instruction there. There's a lot of good competing there. There's a reason why so many young players in the pro ranks are ready to compete at a high level early. It's because they play in that they play that competition. You're going to Atlanta, you're going to California, you're going to Texas, you're playing travel ball, right? You're playing in these tournaments. The problem is that from the time you're 8, 9, 10 years old, there are days, I mean, the normal week, Matt, a normal week is 3, 4, 5 games in 2 days.
That just doesn't happen once you elevate past that.
And if you've got a 10, 11 man roster, that means all of your guys are playing every game. They're playing 5 games in 2 days. That's horrible for your body. It's horrible for your arm, but that's the structure that we have. And, again, it's if Major League Baseball wants to do themselves a favor, they are going to take more control over this with messaging. And honestly, I won't go into my whole spiel like I did last night on Sports Open Line, but I think Major League Baseball needs to invest financially in the youth baseball world. And I don't just mean RBI, which is an amazing program.
Mhm.
I mean, they need to get involved in travel ball tournament, in the showcase circuit, things like that, so they can regulate some of this more. Because a lot of rules that exist, we all know what they are. The pitch smart guidelines exist. Nobody's required to follow them in most tournaments. In some tournaments, they enforce it. Most don't. So it's up to a coach who may or may not know about them. Dr. James Andrews put out a pretty good guideline a long time ago. 5 times your age plus or minus 10 should be your pitch limit when you're a kid. So if you're 14, that means 70 plus or minus 10. So minus 10 if you're struggling and having high pitch count innings, plus 10 if you're going easy, right? And some of it with younger players is, okay, look, I've had 14-year-olds that are built like 12-year-olds, and I've had 14-year-olds that are built like 17-year-olds. You have to be able to you treat them differently, right? But if you're taking that guideline put out by Dr. Andrews, an 18-year-old pitcher can easily throw 90 to 100 pitches and safely. That's the whole point of the Andrews guidelines, is that that's safe. But it also it has to come with rest in between starts. It has to come with not going out and playing shortstop the next game, like things like that. And, if Major League Baseball were smart, this would be a very low level of financial investment to get involved relative to the $11-12 billion industry that they are.
But so many owners would look at the bottom price tag and go, oh, we can't do that.
So short-sighted.
Yeah.
Because listen, one bad free agent contract would probably pay for a decade of what I'm talking about at the youth levels. One bad free agent contract would pay for a decade.
Anthony Rendon could fund it for 30 years.
I mean, it's not that much money. I mean, it's a lot for you and me, but for a $12 billion a year business that's also growing in revenue, it's not that much. It's Matt Pauley and Kevin Wheeler with you here on the Gashouse Gang. Obviously, a lot of baseball so far, Matt. Let's switch to the Blues. Another loss last night, and I was hearing things from Jim Montgomery last night that sound a lot like the things that Drew Bannister was saying about how, our energy was good for 15 minutes, and once New Jersey scored, it kind of let the air out of the balloon, and it's bringing me back. I am a believer in Jim Montgomery. I think he is a phenomenal coach. Of course, I was also a believer in Craig Berube, and he got fired, which is kind of bringing me back to the point I want to emphasize again. It's not the coach. I think Montgomery's better than Bannister. This was a great move. Yeah. Bringing him in was smart. Long term, it's a great move. But now short term, after that little burst, they got off to the really good start, won 4 out of the first 5 under Jim Montgomery. Well, they've now lost 4 of their last 6. And we're seeing some of the same things come up again. The problem is the roster.
Drew Bannister did and said some wacky things.
He did. And again, it was a good move. Moving on from him to Jim Montgomery was a really good move.
Yes. So I don't want to sit here and have revisionist history that Drew Bannister, he was a component of what was going on. I don't think he was the largest component of what was going on, but he was part of it. As they said in the press conference when Jim Montgomery got hired, Doug Armstrong said coaching is no longer an issue. So we know they're getting good coaching. We know that the decisions that are being made are good decisions. Now it's up to the Blues to find a way to find some consistency, to go out and, they talked last night about just from a physical standpoint, they got out physicaled. And when you're in your home building, you got to check guys. You got to get the crowd into it. You got to make it a hornet's nest. And that simply did not happen last night. And like you said, we're starting to see some of the same things that we saw towards the end of the Berube era, certainly during the Drew Bannister era. And that takes us back to, is this the right group of guys? And if it's not, now is when you're really going to figure it out, because there's no longer an excuse. Craig Berube's message getting old isn't an excuse. Drew Bannister never coaching above the minor league level before he got with the Blues in the head coaching capacity. It's no longer an issue. So look at the guys, look at the effort, look at what's going on, and make your roster decisions moving forward. And if that means they're not a playoff team this year and they got to retool a little bit in the offseason, go for it. And we saw the impact that can have. Phil Broberg and Dylan Holloway have been fantastic
Yeah.
for the Blues this year.
Yeah.
And everybody likes to beat up on Jordan Kyrou. He's got the 5-game goal streak right now. His game continues to be at a fairly high level. I think we can still take some issues with what he does defensively and
At
some other
times, yeah,
stuff.
but he's better than he was.
Yeah, absolutely. So go look at who is putting in the effort, who's playing the game the way that Montgomery wants the game to be played. And if you're not under that category, it's okay to move on from those guys.
Yeah, but this is what I keep coming back to. That's so hard. Who's going to take on a big contract for an underperforming player? You don't have, like, of the people that you're going to trade, what are you trading that's going to get you anything in return that anybody else is going to want that you don't want to keep? I mean, all of the guys that are good, you want to keep. You don't want to trade those guys. But the guys that are underperforming, a lot of them have big contracts and they have long-term contracts. And this is why it's frustrating, because I don't see a short-term path out. I just don't see it. I mean, like, we're talking about at least another couple of years of waiting for contracts to expire.
Yeah, every team is capped out, and maybe there's an opportunity there to take a guy who's kind of in the same sort of situation somewhere else, and you just trade a couple bad contracts and see if the change of scenery does something for them. But it's okay to do stuff like that. You're right.
That's not like a path to being good.
It's a path to getting
prayer.
out from underneath a guy who's been underperforming for you. Let's see if you can get something out of another guy. Like, at some point, you can't just keep running the same guys out time and time and time and time again if they are not giving you the type of effort that you expect.
Yeah, and that's the thing that kind of that is really most telling when we heard the things that Drew Bannister said, but also forget what he said, what players were saying during that time, what Braden Shen came out and said, that guys aren't working hard enough. We need to care more, all that kind of stuff. When I'm hearing that stuff, and then I'm hearing Jim Montgomery last night saying, yeah, we were good for 15 minutes, and then one goal against us changed our energy. Guys, not okay. No. Like, the bare minimum expected of a professional athlete is that you try your ass off, that you compete. You can't always succeed. We can't guarantee that. But when I keep hearing this theme from players, from the old coach, and from the new coach, I'm going to listen. And it tells me there's a problem in there, and it's not everybody. There are plenty of guys doing their things the right way, but not enough.
How about Montgomery pulling the goalie as early as he did, and they got the goal off it?
I know, it's crazy. Oh my God. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is, the Blues were a game under 500 before Jim Montgomery. They're a game over 500 since they brought him in. I think they're going to be better as the season goes. His impact is not going to be just measured in a 10-11 game window. I'm a fan. It was a good move, but the team still has its problems.
Yeah, it's a bunch of guys who got 2 coaches fired in about a year.
Yeah, and this one isn't going anywhere. Not anytime soon.
Nope.
You're talking years before you're even going to question whether or not Jim Montgomery is going to be around.
Yeah.
So, obviously the players need to figure it out. And I mean, I'm all for sitting guys in the press box. If they don't want to do it, have a seat and watch. I don't care how much you're getting paid. I mean, like, if that's the way it's got to be, then that's the way it's got to be. If you're going to try to send messages, at least do it now. We'll see. There's a long way to go. If they win 6 games in a row here, all of a sudden they look different. They're in a playoff spot. So again, I'm giving them time. I'm not writing them off. I'm just expressing the frustration that I think a lot of Blues fans have right now.
Rightfully so.
Yep. Matt Pauley and Kevin Wheeler with you on the Gashouse Gang. It is a Wednesday, and, most of the week we talk Cardinals, heavy Cardinals. Nothing's really new on that front today. So we're kind of, we did the pitching topic, and then we're moving on to some other things. And I wanted to get into this topic, Matt, on the college football bowl season, and not so much to just get into the things were better in the old days, because that's not really the point. But we have a lot of complaining amongst college football fans and people who cover college football about players that are opting out of bowl games for the draft, for the transfer portal being open now to the point that it's impacting bowl games, right? Marshall had to pull out of their bowl game because 25 guys entered the transfer portal, and people are losing their minds about all of this. I have a very simple solution I would like to run by you.
I know what it is. I'm going to disagree with you.
And I have a simple solution. And by the way, anybody that wants to comment, we have the comment sections open on YouTube, Twitter, whatever, right here on the side of the page. We can see them. So if you want to comment, feel free. Eliminate half of the bowl games. Just get rid of them. So in 1990, there were 17 bowl games. In the year 2000, this century, there were 21 bowl games. Now there are 47. 94 college football teams out of how many, Matt? What is it, 130?
Yeah, about that.
Roughly, a little bit, give or take. Why are we sending 94 teams to postseason play? It's a waste of time, and it's causing problems because if Marshall's not in a bowl game 20 years ago, not with their record, none of this would even be an issue. And we are seeing a little bit of teams where backups are opting out to get into the portal of playoff teams, the backup quarterback at Penn State as an example. I don't know there's much you can do about that. People want to change the time frame for the transfer portal. The problem is it's geared up toward the academic calendar. This is the semester break. So you cannot push it into January because guys need to be on campus in class at the beginning of the semester because we are still pretending that this is a college effort and not a professional sport. Like we're still living that charade. These bowl games that we're talking about, though, most teams don't make money by going to the Pop-Tart Bowl or the
don't take a shot at the Pop-Tart Bowl.
Well, my team is in it, so I'm going to take a shot at it.
That trophy is amazing.
But the cost of traveling to a lot of these bowl games is more than you're going to get paid by the bowl game. It is not worth doing it. We should not be rewarding 80% of the college football playing body. Bowl games are a reward for being good. We're giving bowl games to teams that are just, you win 6 games? 6 games? We are causing problems by doing this. If it weren't for the portal, if it weren't for players opting out of bowl games and causing all this uproar, I wouldn't care. Play all the games you want. But it's causing problems. There's a simple solution. Cut the bowl games in half. Hey, there we go. There's a Pop-Tart Bowl.
K-State, my alma mater, won it last year. This year, the trophy for the Pop-Tart Bowl has an actual toaster in it. So you can make your Pop-Tart in the trophy.
Well, that makes it worth it for my Canes when they go out there and get to have the frosted Pop-Tarts after wasting their season by losing to unranked teams.
Okay, I will acknowledge what I agree with you on first off. I acknowledge the fact that these other bowls actually mean even less now with the expanded playoff. Because before you had to wait a while for the expanded playoff to get started, so you watch these other games. Now we got playoff games coming up this week.
Got them Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, so I will acknowledge the fact that it feels like the rest of the bowl games mean even less now than before. I acknowledge the fact that the transfer portal is an issue, players leaving, those sort of things. I can't disagree with what you just said. However, Kevin, I love the bowl games. I love the fact that for a good month, especially when a lot of people are home from work, you can turn on the TV at just about any time of day and you're going to be able to find a college football game. I know college football is a business now. It's not about the kids, but I still like to think of college athletics as being about student athletes. And I like the fact that you got some seniors out there who get the bowl experience. I think it's important for fan bases to be able to travel to cool places. As a K-State fan, I can tell you there's been years where they haven't been a top 25 team. They haven't had an especially good year, but they've still ended up in a bowl game, and it's special to the fan base. It's a way to travel. It's a way. And so I think all the stuff that I just mentioned outweighs the other thing. Now, I don't know what to do.
Participation trophies.
Okay.
You should be good. You need to earn rewards. You don't get rewarded for being 500.
You earn a spot.
By the way, who are these teams even playing? If you beat Northeast Louisiana Tech and you're beating the Little Sisters of the Poor, and that's how you get to 6 wins, sorry, you don't get the paid for vacation. Go back and do some more homework. Train, get better. You don't get that. It's ruined. Because I get what you're saying, right? It's a TV product. Nobody's watching these games.
Sure
nobody's attending.
No,
these
nobody's attending. The fan bases are. Nobody else.
Nobody's traveling to them, so we knocked that off the list. It's causing more problems than it's worth. And I'm sorry, but we don't get trophies for trying. Hey, good try, buddy. Go on vacation to Boca Raton for the Boca Raton Bowl.
I don't hate it. I
hate it.
But I don't know, because also when you've got this many guys transferring out, like injury is a part of it as well. If you're somebody who's not played all season long and now all of a sudden you're expected to go out there and play, and there's there is a risk factor to it. Again, I am not dismissing the points that you've made, Kevin. I agree with them. I just disagree with the final product, and it's an unsolvable problem for the reasons you mentioned.
It's very solvable.
The transfer portal stuff.
Oh no, that's not solvable. No.
Yeah, that's
but you can make it less of a problem by just getting rid of half the bowl games.
And that's where I disagree.
I mean, we would still have more than we had 20 years ago if you did that.
Yeah.
Maybe we limit it. Maybe you limit it to the top 50 teams. The top 50 teams get bowl games.
Not hopping on this one, Kevin.
Damn it. All right, I tried.
We are very like-minded in a lot of stuff. We have finally found the topic where we're going to butt heads.
Hey, the longer we do the Gashouse gang, the more you and me and Tom and Bernie are going to argue about these things, because a lot of things, basically, we're in the same realm, but we're going to find these kind of topics and we're going to fight about them.
Yep. I'm
all right, buddy.
And we're still going to be pals.
Of course. It's just guys talking sports, man. That's all it is. But we are out of time, shockingly. We've run a little bit long here, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Remember, you can podcast us anywhere podcasts are hosted. So, if you're seeing this on Twitter and you're like, I missed some of that, you can go back and podcast it wherever you want. Matt Pauley, Kevin Wheeler, this has been the Gashouse Gang on a Wednesday.